Welcome to the Jess and John pod. I'm Jess.
And I'm John. Welcome back.
And thank you to President Trump. Prices are going down. My favorite soda was on sale. And thank you, President Trump. That's what I've been doing. It's a bit with me and my boyfriend. Whenever something's on sale that we like, whenever something slightly good happens, we just say, thank you, President Trump. You're our hero. We thank God we're blessed with you as president as Jesus intended.
Yeah, I don't see any flaws in that logic. I mean, for me, the real big news, my thank you, President Trump moment came when we banned plastic straws. No, we unbanned plastic straws. Forgive me for not realizing what we did with plastic straws. I just know that I sleep better at night and my material condition is vastly improved now that plastic straws are allowed back in the mix of our lives. Thank you, President Trump.
My reusable but plastic straw, I think, speaks to my views as an independent. That's what this is about.
That's a real middle of the road opinion there. I feel like the only thing in the middle of the road is yellow lines and roadkill, to quote one of the weird old men in my Appalachian upbringing. But that works too. All straws that are plastic, they're good now. So I think we can all chill.
Yeah, what happens if a sea turtle encounters this one?
That's a good question. I feel like there's a fine line between like the reusable nature of it, but also
It will end
because
up in a landfill.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, President Trump. The news has been coming in hot and fast, but we're here to talk about what has been going on. And Jessica, I know you've been working on a project for a minute that I want to launch the JJ Pod Nation right into, if you wouldn't mind. I think you have been looking into a story about voting machines, software, Elon Musk, and all the rest. But I think I'll let you take it away on that one. Can you tell us what you've been up to on this story?
Yeah. So the gist is basically this. I said this. The gist is this. I've gone full blue on, actually. Not really. But I looked into a letter by cybersecurity experts that was sent to Kamala Harris saying that this election, like the last presidential election, should be audited just to ensure the results are what they say they are, because a lot of people are saying they're not what the official confirmed result of the election is. And it's a weird position to be in. Like, we live in the best democracy in the world, right? We do all this work, supposedly abroad, to ensure elections are secure in other hopeful democratic countries. And it just kind of felt like, because of these security breaches that have happened in recent years since the last presidential election, an audit makes sense. So that's basically what I argue in the piece, because the day after January 6th, that lives in its shadow, is January 7th, 2021. And that was the day that a group of folks hired by Trump's attorney, Sidney Powell, met with the Board of Elections office in Georgia in Coffee County. They were hired to steal Dominion voting software, which Google wanted to autocorrect to Dominican voting software.
Naturally.
And I find that beautiful. It was Dominion voting software. Court records show this happened. They were caught on surveillance cameras doing this. And I talked to some cybersecurity experts. Like, if you had what we know they had thanks to these court records, which is tabulation systems, an entire Dominion supplied laptop, USB, drives that they plug in to program the voting systems. They copied pretty much everything. And they basically said, once you have access to this software, you can test it to penetrate it and develop malware that you can then use to change how these machines count votes. We don't have any evidence that they did this, that they developed malware, that they used it. But we do have some pretty damning emails and text messages that show the security breaches happened and it's possible. And so if it's possible, we should just do audits to ensure it didn't happen. And I reached out to a bunch of Secretary of State's offices and Board of Elections officials, because the number one cybersecurity in the country recommended, because of these documented breaches, they should audit the results. And these systems are used in states across the country, including the swing states. And they didn't have audits done. 2 states, Wisconsin and North Carolina, said, yeah, we've done our audits. And then they sent me links to them. If you go to those sites, you get errors when you try to access the software. One of them is password protected. And so where audits have supposedly been done, they're not publicly available. And that's fucking nuts. So that's the situation we're in. And I go into crazy detail in the piece, but that's what happened. I didn't realize that happened in 2021.
It's really wild. I mean, the news obviously travels so fast. Um, and I think that's kind of by design, right? But so we are talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, this infamous find me 11,000 votes remark made after the 2020 election, right? Is that the county in Georgia? Is that
Yeah.
the set and setting of this story?
Yeah. So that did happen in the state of Georgia, where Trump was saying, find me these votes. And this specific case is Curling v. Raffensperger. And
Who was that guy? The Secretary of State or something?
in Georgia, yeah. And it's related to that, but it's a little different, right? Because Trump definitely wanted to steal the election. What this did is it put the tools in their hands if they were to use them in the future, which is really scary because they kind of hinted in some text messages that were obtained by CNN. And so 2 men hired by attorneys for Trump, so Sidney Powell in this case, Jim Penrose, who's a cybersecurity expert, has worked with the CIA in various parts of the government, outside of the government, and a guy, Doug Logan, CEO of Cyber Ninjas. They texted back and forth about what the plan was to do with this stolen software. And Jim Penrose said, here's the plan. Let's keep this close. We only have until Saturday to decide if we're going to use this report to try to decertify the Senate runoff election or if we should hold it for a bigger moment. So they stole this software when you had the runoff election for Warnock and Ossoff in Georgia. And they were basically going back and forth like, do we use this shit now to mess with the runoff? Or do we hold it for something bigger? We can only imagine what that could mean. Did that mean the 2024 election? Does that mean something else? It's scary that those messages exist when we know they had what they would need to manipulate an election if they wanted to, according to these cybersecurity experts. It's really damning what they had. And like their whole faces are not only on security cameras in Coffee County, Georgia, where you have Eric Cheney, an election official, letting them in, just coordinating with attorneys for Trump to have them access all of this voting software. It's really, really insane. But you don't just have that. We also have emails. They were so brazen. They officially documented everything, where there's this one email between Maggio, who works for Sullivan Strickler Data Solutions. That is one of the people that Jim Penrose and Sidney Powell hired. It's the firm that actually went in to do this work in Dominion. And they admitted to doing it. They put out a public message through their attorney that, yes, we stole the Dominion software because we were told to by an attorney. So we assumed it was legal because this is, an agent of the court. And so that was what they said, why they were innocent. But the emails are crazy. There's one the morning of January 7th where they say, we're on our way. Per Jim Penrose's request, we're on our way to Coffee County, Georgia to collect what we can from election/voting machines and systems. Then we have the security camera footage showing them going in and out from 12:37 p.m. to 6:19 p.m. Then we have another email from Maggio with Sullivan Strickler, again going to Sidney Powell. Everything went smoothly yesterday with the Coffee County collection. Everyone involved was extremely helpful. We are consolidating all of the data collected and we'll be uploading it to our secure site for access by your team. Then in court documents, we now have this hard drive, forensic images of an election management system server The court has a list of IP addresses that have downloaded and emailed this data that Sullivan and Strickler collected from Coffee County. This includes images of ballots, election management system servers, a folder named Dominion Supplied Laptop, which is a copy of that laptop's hard drive, a tabulation system, flash drives from the election office. And so the court exhibits also show what physical equipment they stole. They had tabulators, touchscreen voting machines, a computer used to check in voters, and that laptop that is supplied by Dominion. So it's actually crazy how much shit they got and then shared with Trump's team. Now, what's interesting is a lot of people say, because Trump went out in his speech and was like, oh, Elon is so good with those voting systems in Pennsylvania. They assume you need someone who's in the tech world to do this. But these cyber experts I talked to really said that there are 10 or 12 vulnerabilities with these systems that a reasonable senior undergraduate computer science student would ask about in a computer security class. And here's how we can attack each one without really much effort. You don't need an NSA level of security, cybersecurity experience to hack into these systems, which is the craziest part, that like a pretty amateur person could do it. And that's what we saw happen, was people like Eric Cheney, who's just on the board of elections in Coffee County, ended up making a YouTube video about how to hack into one of these voting machines. He took the fifth when he was asked about that video that was public.
I'm sorry, what?
On the stand. Yeah. There's still a YouTube video up of Clay Parikh demonstrating how to hack into Georgia's voting systems during testimony in DeKalb GOP versus Raffensperger, because there was a series of these cases, and you can still replay it. It was posted on Judge McAfee's page. So the judge that oversaw this case in Georgia decided it was totally okay to show a super user administrator password and a full demo on how to hack into these machines on YouTube, accessible by anyone. And so the level of organization that it seems these folks have to put this information out, how to use it, they collected all of it. We don't know what they've done with it, but just knowing that it's possible that they could use all of this to do something is scary. I spent the week after the election talking to all of these people and ripping my hair out because this happened in 2021. A lot of these court records are from 2022. And I think Democrats didn't take any of this seriously, even though it's public information, because their immediate response to Trump saying the election was stolen was, no, we have the most secure possible elections in the United States. They were secure when Biden won because they were audited. They were not secure because the software was bulletproofed. And that's scary. And now I think Democrats have put themselves in a position where, because they swore up and down election security is not an issue in the United States, they can't possibly change their mind and say now it is. I think that's a sign of weakness. They absolutely can say, look what's happened. We've got to make sure this was a secure election. We've got to audit this one. But they're not. And that's crazy to me because now he's in office.
So you just outlined these vulnerabilities, and basically we could know if they were exploited, but that would require an audit?
Yeah, it would. So because the software only deals with the computer systems that count the ballots, Georgia is the only state that doesn't rely on paper ballots and only relies on a computer screen. So it would not be possible to audit in a meaningful way in Georgia, but in the other states, they could count the paper ballots and assess if the final vote count doesn't match up with the physical ballots people filled out and signed in many cases. And so thankfully, we still have a paper record we could audit. And it wouldn't mean like we're counting millions of votes. It means we take a sample of votes that's statistically significant in the swing states. And then we see, is this consistent with what the computer tabulators have counted? It's exactly what we did in 2020 when they said, oh, this election was stolen. We did an audit and we can do it again. But the fact that we're not is insane to me when you have this level of breach.
Yeah, and so without doing that, we're just kind of taking the word of Trump and his team who message back and forth, as you outlined, about these security flaws in our election systems. We're seeing, talking about specific counties of, where to go in and where to, gather information about specific vulnerabilities. We're seeing on security footage doing this. Um, it's not like the right wingers have a clean record when it comes to election integrity, right? I mean, we just had Pam Bondi join the administration, who, if you're old enough, you'll remember was at the heart of the 2000 election in Florida and Bush versus Gore. Now is at the seat of government power. This is the cast of characters that we're just kind of trusting that they didn't act maliciously in this way when we could do an audit. Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's kind of like I asked myself the question, well, if this group of folks, Sidney Powell, Jim Penrose, Trump's buddies, if they had the ability to do this, would they? Like, just a gut check. What do I think they would do if they had the ability to do it? That's what scares me. Is what my gut does when I ask myself that question. I won't believe it until I see evidence of fraud or inconsistencies in the vote totals, but bad actors do have what they would need to hack an election if they wanted to, according to these cybersecurity experts. That's a scary position to be in the greatest democracy in the world.
Yeah, this is a really crazy story. Obviously, great work that you did on this. I think how it lands with me is like there's bad actors all around, and bad actors are going to act badly, right? But in a healthy system, they would encounter pushback and guardrails and opposition parties that are using power to prevent them from acting badly. But in this case, I think it's like obviously this, Donald Trump getting elected like he did again, um, goes to more than just election security stuff. Obviously, this is a movement. Obviously, they are sucking in people um, from all kinds of camps that you wouldn't expect to fall into that movement. So that's one thing, and that's got to be addressed. But I think what really gets me about this story is if you don't push back on these actors that are kind of doing things around clear election security vulnerabilities, and they continue to gain power, then that's eventually going to become a problem. You want to make sure, like in our response to everything that the MAGA movement is doing right now as they're in power, we obviously want to have people countering that. But when election time comes around, we want to know that it's going to be fair and square. And we can't really know that without an audit or without an opposition party who is taking the cues that you laid out about the vulnerability of these machines that count our votes. If we don't do that, then when election time comes around and we have to beat these folks in an election, that the thing is going to be fair and secure. I could see, people criticizing this and saying, "Oh, it sounds a little bit far fetched," but keep in mind, I mean, we just go back to Bush versus Gore. These are the same people. I mean, Kavanaugh and Pam Bondi. These people are in the government right now. They did the same exact playbook back in 2000, and now they're standing on the shoulders of giants. And when it comes around to check their power and to make sure that they're not doing bad things, we're at that moment right now, and for some reason, it's not happening. Why is that?
I don't think it's money, right? The Maricopa County recount was super expensive. This kind of recount in all of the meaningful swing states where we have paper ballots, so that would be Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, it would take about a third of what they had to count in just Maricopa County, Arizona. It would be 698,777 total votes. So 175,000 in Wisconsin, 179,000 in Michigan, 164,000 in Nevada, and 180,000 in Pennsylvania. That would give us a statistically significant sample where we could say with a 99% confidence level that what we count in these ballots is reflective of the actual votes people had. And we could test that against what the vote totals look like in those states. So it wouldn't be super expensive. And it is already recommended by the cybersecurity, the CISA, which is actually housed within DHS. So now Christine Ohm's overseeing it. So I doubt they're actually going to do it. But
Is that the
they,
person who shot her dog?
yeah, in the past they recommended
Great.
that we do it. And so it's crazy because ES&S, the other major voting system software, was also stolen in Michigan. Now, we haven't had court proceedings for what went down there, but in the same email chain with Sidney Powell, the Sullivan Strickler guys talked about their work in Michigan. And so we'll see what they actually got. If they ended up penetrating any software, for now, we just know they illegally obtained ES&S equipment, and that they broke open the security seal. We don't know what they did with it yet. So those two things account for about 70% of election software in the United States. How did we get in a place where we rely on majorly two companies for most of our election computers? That is insane. And a lot of them have, or those two rather, have worked to outcompete a lot of the others. That's crazy. The level of monopoly capitalism where that is the case, that you would just need to do two operations where you had friendly officials on two separate boards of elections to get the software, and then you have access to software everywhere else because of the market share that these two voting systems companies have. That's also crazy. So I think they're afraid because if we find security breaches, suddenly that's the majority of our election software that we've got to change. That is an expensive problem. The audit is not.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that your elections are fair, right? And I think there's no denying that Donald Trump has an appeal to broad swaths of people that resulted in him being elected undeniably again. But this is a whole separate problem of needing to make sure that when we have elections, they are fair and they don't fall under the purview of just a couple of companies that have the whole market share and can open us up to vulnerabilities from their machines governing all of our elections. That's based I'm right in?
Yeah, and there's problems on both sides, right? The same guys that were screaming we need laws to increase election security after Biden won don't seem to care to address any of the vulnerabilities created by the Trump security breach,
Mm.
Similarly, Democrats who democracy is in the name, they're not paying much attention to this, so crazy.
Well, chalk that up to the very fragile house of cards that we're all kind of living under.
Yeah, we're both obsessed with the 2024 election, which I suppose the history books will be as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Stay tuned for our conversation about John's recent work with the dogs and the cats in Springfield.
Oh, the dogs and cats. Yes. We're going to get into that.
John
And
went over to Springfield and figured out what was up. It was a really great piece of journalism that you put out, sort of documentary style journalism, but we're going to go over a lot of what you discovered in your trip there, including meeting the cat that started the rumor. So definitely tune in for that. Welcome to the Jess and John pod. I'm Jess.
And I'm John. Welcome back.
John's on the road, but, he's in a cozy sweater. He's got a good mic. We're fine.
Yeah, I think we're good. Hello to JJ Nation from Nashville, Tennessee. We got the cardigan of justice on right now, and we cobbled together enough equipment to make this thing work. It's a audio medium, but for our visual listeners, jump in on good places to find cardigans. I've been in the market for a while now, and I can't just be hacking it with this one.
Are we going to talk about enterprise car rental, or do we want to jump into John's recent trip, also on the road to Springfield, where he investigated the dogs and the cats rumors?
I think we can save Enterprise for the end of this, but if you just want to, if you want to skip ahead for the details of how I feel about Enterprise rental car, do that. And the short summation is fuck Enterprise rental car is what I have to say.
That's a beautiful thing, John.
Thank you.
Beautiful thing to say.
Thank you.
Okay. You went I already watched the documentary reporting that you did, but you went to Springfield, Illinois. And
Springfield, Ohio.
sorry, Springfield, Ohio.
There's so many.
It has to be Ohio. I need to remember that because it's JD Vance land. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, I
JD
do.
Vance was obsessed with this story, and it's kind of his fault that it became a problem. But you went there to investigate the rumors about the dogs and the cats and the Haitian migrants there.
Yes, I did. And if you'll remember this story, um, it's probably because Donald Trump said it from the debate stage. He got up there and he said they are eating the dogs and cats and the pets of the people who live in Springfield, Ohio. So we went to check up on if that was true. Spoiler alert, it was not. But I'll get into the details of that work because it really is an interesting um, lens to look at what Donald Trump is trying to do right now with all this talk of mass deportations and such. So, Springfield, Ohio, if you don't know, let's set the stage. This is a town kind of in Western Ohio. It was your typical Midwest industrial town. Now it's got all the problems of the Rust Belt, right? But this was a union town. It was manufacturing all kinds of stuff. International Harvester was there. We met up with a union president who gave us a picture of what it was like in the 80s because it was described as the poster child of the American dream. We talked to this union president there who back in the 80s, he was hired on and making like $30 an hour at a manufacturing job. If you fast forward today, the manufacturing that is still in Springfield, it's auto parts. It's all the stuff it used to be. But people, instead of making $30 an hour back in the 80s, are now hired on at $18 an hour today.
But
And
that's
so
fine because stuff is way cheaper now anyway, right?
that's how it's supposed to work, right? But I don't think anybody really thinks this is a good deal, right? We're all out there paying all these crazy prices. So yeah, it went through that typical evolution, right? We had a good jobs base, and then corporations and government came together to ship those jobs overseas. We lost the manufacturing base. We lost the tax base from people making really good money, and all kinds of problems ensued. It's a town of about 60,000 folks, mostly white. And, they were struggling after the loss of that base. And a couple of things that the Ohio government did made it much worse, right? So the Ohio legislature over the last couple of years has been handing out tax cuts for the rich. And this has been landing in Springfield pretty hard because when they gave those tax cuts to the richest people in Ohio, it came from local services, hospitals, police, schools in towns just like Springfield. So those things were already stressed. They lost their economic base, they lost their tax base, which created this big $12 billion hole, right, that went directly to the rich. And then this town of 60,000 people had 20,000 Haitians show up over the course of just several years, right? So it's 60,000 people, 20,000 more people show up there. And that put a lot of stress on the police, the hospitals, the schools, and it created an environment that was ripe for rumors to start flying about the new neighbors that come into town, right? So, we had people in Springfield starting to say, hey, things are really hard here. The immigration made it even harder. And these rumors about Haitian immigrants getting $1,700 a month from the government to pay their rent started cropping up. We heard rumors that the Haitians were getting magic cards that they could just go to the grocery store and swipe for all the groceries that they needed. We heard that they could walk down to the car dealership and get a brand new car for no money. You know, all of this stuff starts flying around when the folks show up, right? And then this was made even more tense because you had a Haitian person driving a car who got into an accident where a white kid was killed. Fast forward, and all of the worst actors show up. You have Blood Tribe and neo Nazis marching through the streets, inflaming all this racial tension. And this is the atmosphere where Donald Trump said, hey, in Springfield, Ohio, they're eating the cats and dogs. The Haitians need to go right now, and we are going to start our mass deportations there. We went to see how much of this was true, and what we found was pretty crazy. It's worthwhile to recognize, the background of what was going on here. First of all, U.S. intervention in Haiti had a lot to do with this, right? We have intervened in governments all across the world. We've definitely messed with Haiti in ways, to put it lightly, that have not served the Haitian people there at all, that has not made them more secure in the least. And our intervention in Haiti, but in all these other countries, are the reason, in part, why people are showing up and coming to our country. So you had this legacy of intervention. Then you had the earthquake hit in 2010. And in 2021, before this wave happened in Springfield, Haiti's president was assassinated. And this threw the country into chaos. And hundreds of thousands of Haitians were looking for a place to go. Gangs were running the country. We heard really harrowing first-person accounts from Haitians in Springfield about how bad it was and what exactly they were fleeing. Then, in the middle of that, the Biden administration grants temporary protected status to migrants coming in from Haiti, so they could come here, they could get a work visa, and they could set up shop in Springfield. This is what really kicks off a lot of people showing up. And when we got to Springfield, we interviewed some of the Haitians who were protected by that order, TPS, about what their life was like. And one of them told us, he fled incredible violence. He shows up to Springfield. He goes to get help from St. Vincent de Paul, which is helping, the new folks get on their feet. But while he was waiting for his work permit that took a year to get, he was exploited by landlords in Springfield, which is a practice that was happening all over the place. This particular person was living in a house with 15 other Haitian immigrants who were each paying hundreds of dollars in rent, to sleep on a mat in a tiny, little house that wasn't upkept well at all, right? Then you have, that's largely the situation. These folks are getting jobs at the places that are still manufacturing auto parts but are no longer union. They're working 12-hour days. They're getting paid about $18 an hour, but they're pretty happy with that situation. But this is kind of inflaming resentment in the entire town. So another character we talked to is this guy who was running a homeless shelter, right? And he is feeding about 75 people a night in Springfield. But the thing is, he's claiming that the homeless people that he's feeding are displaced by the Haitians coming in, right? And a lot of the people that we spoke to in that homeless shelter were saying, repeating a lot of the rumors, these Haitians are getting $1,700 a month and magic cards and all of this. We wanted to check up on those rumors. So, we took them directly to a couple of the Haitians and we said, hey, is it true that you're getting $1,700 a month, that you're getting these magic cards, et cetera, et cetera? And of course, no, they were not. And one of the most powerful moments was this guy, Patrick, a Haitian working at Topre America, making auto parts. He just pulled out his pay stubs And you could see right there, this guy who fled incredible violence, who is, living with 20 other people paying $200 a month, he is showing up to work 12-hour days, 7 days a week, making auto parts. And right there it is. He's paying into Social Security. He's paying into Medicare. He's paying into schools, police, roads, all of it, right? And that's not even to mention the fact, of course, he's not getting $1,700 a month. Of course, there are no magic cards. But that's the kind of environment that Haitians are dealing with, right? They're working really hard. They're living out their American dream, being accused of getting all this free stuff at the same time that they are paying into Social Security and Medicare for a lot of the people who are spreading those rumors, right? So, we heard that, and we went back to a lot of the people who told us all of these rumors, and we said, we checked it out. We saw his pay stubs, and he's actually paying into your Social Security, your Medicare that you're drawing right now. So what do you think of that? And we got a lot of people to do something that if you ask me, I couldn't really tell you why this doesn't happen. They just hadn't thought of the possibility of being lied to. We said, we checked it. It's not true. They're actually paying into your Social Security. How's that make you feel? And they said, well, they must be the exception to the rule. And we said, what if they're not? And a lot of people said, well, I guess that means that we were lied to on this massive scale. And we ended up having these conversations about how these situations that are really tough for everybody are used to the political benefit of people like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. I can feel myself getting long-winded about this, but the main thing is a lot of people in town told us, hey, our senator's J.D. Vance, now he's the vice president. We expected from his position of power, this being Ohio, that we could reach out to him and we could expect some kind of help. A couple people in town did that, but what they got instead of help was this ridiculous political show that we all saw play out from the debate stage. Like you said, we went to check up on the actual cat that they were talking about, right? This is a cat that's owned by a person in town. And she wakes up one day and finds her cat is missing. She thinks that the Haitians, stole it and ate it, right? And she calls in, she calls the police. A police report is generated, and this ends up falling into the hands of the staff of J.D. Vance. And as I'm sitting in her apartment with the cat that was not eaten, by the way, she found the cat in her basement. The cat is walking around. I'm talking to her, and she pulls out her phone and shows me a voicemail from J.D. Vance's office, right? She called asking for help. What they found instead was this police report about a person whose cat was missing. And then, a U.S. senator from the state of Ohio, who's now the vice president, allowed this situation to happen, or probably contributed to it himself, where instead of solving the real issues at hand, he made it into the most ridiculous, vile political attack possible, and whipped up all this hatred towards a population of people who are doing what we're all told the American dream is: showing up to work every day, paying your taxes, and loving your neighbors, right? And that's, the long, that's a medium length story for a long video that we put out about the cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio.
I will say the person who left the voicemail from J.D. Vance's office suspiciously sounded a lot like Senator Vance. Not saying it was him, just saying suspiciously similar voices. But I think the craziest part of the documentary was definitely the end, and that conversation where there was the reckoning over the paycheck and the fact that these migrant workers from Haiti were not being paid a ton of money. They were not being given government assistance. They were not outpaying residents of Springfield when it came to rent. They were living 15 to an apartment. sending money to their family who was struggling under a regime that is essentially backed by the United States after US backed coup and a horrible UN peacekeeping mission where peacekeeping officers in Haiti were defecating in the water supply, which led to a cholera outbreak. There were multiple confirmed accusations of sexual assault at the hands of UN peacekeeping officers in Haiti. Like, the United States just decimated this country. And for what, you know? And now we have all of these Haitian migrants in the United States. And it was almost this sort of change in a man who was very angry and was blaming migrants for his economic predicament, and kind of realized, well, if they're here and they just want to work hard and they're getting fucked over by the same corporations and landlords as me, then they're good by me, pretty much is what he said. Then I'm okay with them being here, which was really interesting to go from, it wasn't I'm wrong, it was I'm lied to, which I think is easier to say, but it's the truth. To go from that to, like, you know what, I'm okay with them. It was so fast. And we think these views are so entrenched, and maybe they're not.
They really aren't, and that's what stuck with me from shooting this piece. And I think I'll just tell the story of one of the people we talked to, and who was getting services that they need. This was a homeless individual in Springfield. His name was William. We met him at the warming shelter, and we've just all been lied to, and we're constantly being lied to by the richest people on earth who have politicians in their pocket, mainly right-wing people, who are just using our public systems to line their own pockets, and so that we don't focus on that, they tell the most ridiculous lies that you could talk to. And it really became clear to me by talking to this one guy named William at the homeless shelter. And he said he was in his probably mid or late 40s. He said, I fell into opioid addiction and I lost basically everything that I had from that. He was living in a tent in the woods in Springfield and coming in to get meals from the shelter. I asked him about his background, and he said, I grew up poor and I joined the military because I wanted to fight for my country. Then he said they sent him off to war. I think it was the Gulf War. And he said, I quickly realized that they lied to me about what I was fighting for. They tell you it's fighting for your country, but really what you're doing is fighting wars for rich people. He said this, and he said, I was lied to by my government. I would never serve again, knowing what I know now. He was really resentful from that. And then, he went to talk about his current situation and started repeating a lot of the rumors that we heard. He said, I went over there and I fought, and I come back here and I live in a tent, and it's because Haitians are getting $1,700 a month in magic cards and all that. And I asked him, I said, well, we talked to a lot of those people and they said that they're not getting any of that. They said that they're showing up to work for 12-hour days. They're paying their taxes and all of this. And I asked him, what if the same rich people that lied to you about why you were going to fight a war are now lying about Haitian migrants to you so that you focus on them, people who share more in common with you, rather than focusing on somebody like the Sackler family who caused the opioid epidemic in this country. Someone like the people who are surrounding Donald Trump right now, who are benefiting and lining their pockets by cutting our public services. What if those people lied to you again, just like they did when they sent you to war, and are getting you to fight other people that you share more in common with? And he just had this huge revelation on camera. He got emotional about it. And I think why it stuck with me is that conversation was 30 or 40 minutes, and for whatever reason, the political opposition that we have in this country, that we're expecting to stand up against this MAGA movement right now, never goes out there and has that kind of conversation. But when you do, and I do this in my job all the time, you can see how far people can move. When you have somebody who is accurately telling you who's causing the problem, and why they're lying to you, right? But we never get that. We just get bogged down in this left right thing that's not serving us at all. But I think you should go watch the video, and I think it's just a really good way to see that although these problems might seem really baked in, people can move, but we need political leaders who are going to take the conversation that way. And anybody who doesn't take it that way right now is adding to the problem.
Yeah, I talk to folks in Iowa a lot because when the unions were on strike, immigrant workers were brought in to scab. And the takeaway was not that corporations take advantage of desperate people. The takeaway was immigrant workers are stealing our jobs and we have to get them out of our country. And I think that, a conversation that is 30, 40 minutes is really all it takes to get through to folks about who to actually be mad at. And just think about how much money the richest people in the country have invested into this narrative that everything else is the problem, except for the people with money and influence. Of course, those are the people creating the material conditions we live under. So this kind of reporting that exposes those fractures in a way that almost capitalizes on this cartoonish political moment where Trump and JD Vance are talking about they're eating the cats and the dogs. It's like something genuinely out of South Park instead of our actual news. I think it's necessary that we investigate stories like this, and maybe even, I don't know, we don't make editing decisions when we go on these trips. I've done this with More Perfect Union, and sometimes it breaks my heart when those moments don't make the final cut. But I do think there's a place in media for those conversations to just be posted in full.
For sure.
Because it's not always a Thanksgiving dinner table argument when you engage with Trump supporters like a lot of liberals believe.
Yep. I think that's it. For more, check out that video. And that is what is up with the cats and dogs and the political hellscape that we live in, Springfield style.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's in the news besides the stuff that we're reporting. I obviously have my eyes on the Treasury. I'm always reporting on the economy and money. And what Elon has done, I don't carry the same suspicions that he's just going to stop Social Security payments for all Americans. But a lot of people seem to believe that's what he's up to. Today, he tweeted that a lot of the money that is meant to go towards Social Security and other programs is going towards illegals. And he didn't post any receipts. Nothing coming from that. I'm almost certain that his work with Doggy will be decided in the Supreme Court.
Love that.
And
name.
I read this op-ed type piece by former Treasury secretaries, and I think maybe it's a thing that if you're a Treasury secretary, you really care about, federal payments. And so there was an old DC Circuit case that Kavanaugh, the Trump-appointed Supreme Court justice, wrote an opinion on. And so a lot of people are thinking, this is a Trump Supreme Court. They're going to rule with Trump no matter what. But Congress, according to the Constitution, has the power of the purse. They decide when we spend money and who we give it to. And if they have appropriated funds to a federal agency, Justice Kavanaugh wrote in 2013 that the president, no one in the executive branch, even the president, can take away that money or decide that we are now spending less of the money that was appropriated. Only Congress can review the amount that they've appropriated and change it. And so if money has been allocated already to the Department of Education, to Social Security recipients, they cannot have anyone in the executive branch suddenly decide it's not going there. So I am going to be glued to the screen the day that Supreme Court ruling comes to see if Justice Kavanaugh is loyal to Justice Kavanaugh or he completely changes his interpretation of the Constitution suddenly and sides with Trump. So I'm kind of obsessing over that a little bit right now. John, what's on your radar?
I believe that we deserve an opposition party worth a damn. So that is why, if you're listening to my segments on the podcast and you think, hey, this guy's beating up on Democrats a lot, that is why we deserve an opposition party to this. And I am just not satisfied with what we have going on right now. And what I'm talking about lately in the news, a couple things. We had the DNC chair race. So, what big, bold direction are we going to go in response to Donald Trump? For the person that is kind of working behind the scenes in the party, well, we pick the guy who thinks that there are good billionaires that we should talk to, that we should bend the knee to, that we should appeal to for money. So, if that's any indication, that is where we're going. But the larger thing that really stuck with me was this Hakeem Jeffries press conference. You guys had brought this up in our show chat. Our buddy Ken Klippenstein has been doing some great reporting on this. And what I wanted to talk about is just a clip of Hakeem Jeffries out there saying, well, what do you want us to do? What leverage do Democrats have to stand up to any of the things that we see in the news? They've got the presidency, the Senate, and the House. It's their government, and we can't do nothing about it. So on the one hand, I want to say that they have much more leverage, just factually, by the numbers, than Mitch McConnell did when he put up legendary resistance to Barack Obama that paved the way for all of the nightmares that we're seeing before us. Mitch McConnell and the GOP was down and out. They were down bad, as the kids say, right? They were way out of power, and they did not let that shape their strategy at all. They put up crazy resistance at every turn. That once again just paved the way for all of the stuff we're seeing now. So, Democrats have all of that leverage that Mitch McConnell had, plus much more. So you might ask yourselves, well, why are they out here just kind of rolling over preemptively before anything happens? And I think it's because they have this strategy that I would argue doesn't match our political reality. Most of the times when you see this, Democrats are trying to say, hey, you broke it. You broke it. You bought it. This is your government now. So you are going to own, Republicans who run the government, all of the bad things that Republican controlled government does. And while that makes sense, this is kind of the problem that Democrats always face. They're so right on paper. They're so, academically right about things. It makes a logical conclusion, right? But that doesn't really match up with political reality. And what I'd say is so many years of right-wing propaganda was designed to associate Democrats with government, whether they control the government or not, so that anything government does, keep in mind we have a government to deliver for all of us. We could have healthcare. We could have nice roads. We could have guaranteed retirement. We could have a minimum wage, worker protections, all of this. It could be government, right? But 50 years of propaganda has welded Democrats to the brand of government. So anything that Republican government does now is going to land with the public as being a Democratic problem, right? And that's the flaw in this strategy. Democrats want to sit back and say everything that Republicans do, that is their problem. But what they're not realizing is the propaganda has made this in the mind of the public such that whatever bad things are happening now are going to be, if not totally associated with Democrats, then at least subconsciously associated with it, right? So I'm always wanting them to take a page out of the Mitch McConnell playbook, put up an actual opposition here, and build from there. But all indications are that that is not what's going to happen, and you can expect me to keep talking about that on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that when you have a party that is is bought and sold by so many corporations, so many of the same ones that donate to Republicans. I just always go back to they're all rich elitists. Like they're doing this on purpose. They don't really care if Trump rolls back every CFPB regulation and the banks are bankrupting people with overdraft fees and credit card late payments. I think that they don't care. Like that's what gets me is how did we get in this position where all of the people running the country don't care? And I tuned into an AOC live recently, and it sounds like resistance lib scripts, you know? Like the same language is not spewed when Democrats are getting in the way and the Senate parliamentarian is why we can't have nice things. You know what I mean? It's really frustrating to tune in now. I want an actual party that stands up to what Elon Musk is fucking doing. Like, I don't know. It's exhausting. So yeah, seeing Hakeem Jeffries say that, it reminded me of CNN when Christine Elm was on, and she's like, "But the government, people don't trust the government." And then the CNN, correspondent is like, "You are the government now." And it's like Matt Gaetz, who is still relevant for some reason. I don't know why he was on my X timeline. Thanks, Elon.
Ugh.
But he said that Kendrick's performance was the regime's response to Trump winning. Who the fuck is the regime? You think there's a secret deep state of black performance artists that are making decisions in America? Like,
Scary.
what do these people believe? It's just sickening.
Yeah. Eventually somebody will start take a cue from Bernie and just keep the focus on wages and healthcare and retirement and all the nice shit that we could have if we didn't have billionaires' hands in our pockets constantly. But I'm still waiting for thousands of people to do that. So if you're one of those people, write the show and we'll talk with you and maybe get around to that political revolution we were all talking about so long ago.
But the first subject of the political revolution is enterprise rent-a-car, I guess.
Oh,
We need you guys' support in this.
yeah, this is my beef with enterprise rental car. If you tuned into the earlier part of this podcast, you heard the short story, which is "fuck those people," and the longer story, this is an axe to grind. It's not politically related, but I'm going to go ahead and trafficking conspiracy theory here and say that no matter what good or service you interact with on a regular day, the engine of our economy and of blood-sucking capitalism has affected every good and service you could possibly interact with. And I recently interacted with enterprise rent-a-car. And of course, it's like the healthcare system, right? You log into a website that doesn't really work. You give it all your information. You make a couple of phone calls. When that thing crashes, you get redirected to an office that can't help you. You go through a couple dark nights of the soul and you start drinking at 2 p.m. You finally convince yourself to download their app. It has the same problems. And then you find yourself at the end of this in a conversation with another like working class person who's hired by one of these companies, and you're in a standoff to be like, "Listen, I'm not hanging up the phone until you can show me the car that I'm going to rent tomorrow morning," right? And this is an experience I had recently, and I would just like to say I noticed the trend of this user experience being replicated across all factors of our economy, and I just won't take it. You know what I mean? We have to rebel against this.
I'm a vegetarian, so I'm always like strapped for nutrients. I'm always like, where can I find food with nutrients, especially in the Midwest? And every product I learn to depend on gets bought by a large food conglomerate, and then they change the ingredients so that it tastes bad and has no nutrients. And I hate it. My boyfriend's been calling it the Walmartification
It's
of
the
everything,
Walmartification of everything.
where they try and scale everything up and make it cheaper so that they can maximize products or profits, and then all of our products suck.
Yeah, they
And
suck and they're like expensive too.
clothes fall apart in the washer now. The
Yeah.
washer's falling apart. It's tripping my outlet. Got to get a new one of those. Everything's
The
bad.
outlet's falling apart. The wiring's bad. This shit sucks.
It's just a nightmare. Living in America, you're just struggling. I was reading, this is actually sad. Maybe I shouldn't say this. Um, I don't want to bring the vibe down, but I was reading an old piece of research that always breaks my brain back open. Um, but it's about opioid overdose deaths. And there's
Mm.
this researcher who took in a bunch of data points and saw the strongest predictive factor was actually where there was a high housing cost burden. So people spending more than 30% of their monthly income on rent. They looked into this further. They found that opioid overdose deaths, where there is a high housing cost burden, occur around the first of the month. And it's not the case that my conservative classmates in graduate school initially believed that this is because that's when folks who are poor and on drugs get their welfare checks. There were actually more overdose deaths the day before rent is due, the day before the first of the month, than the day after. Also, they looked into who gets welfare checks and when they get this kind of assistance. There was no correlation with overdose deaths, whereas there was when rent was due and people were housing cost burdened. And so, yeah, just the Walmartification of housing has led people to literally like kill themselves because of the cost of survival. And a lot of people associate opioid overdose deaths as sort of, these are junkies or people who have a predisposition to using substances on the fringes of society. No, these are people who are struggling under capitalism a lot of the time and don't like what you have to go through to survive and don't like how cruel our society is. And they're coping with that. And yeah, there's just so much research to back up that poverty takes lives in America. But for some reason, our politicians don't give a fuck about that.
Totally. And it's on that spectrum, right? Like that's the extreme end of the spectrum. That is very real. But, if that doesn't describe you, then you're probably like me earlier today, grappling with some huge multinational corporation and their shitty website, So whether it's that or whether you've been touched by this, epidemic in a very personal way, it all shares a common denominator that corporations and the people who lead them have way too much power, and all of those people are in the current administration, and the opposition party is kind of off in la la land, pretending that people are going to care about process to get out of this massive hole that we're in. And I think it's probably going to take a lot of us joining together and demanding a different direction.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah.
And that's the pod, everyone.
That's what we do here,
That's what we do.
We just spread the good word.
Cue the Obama clip, nailing a three-pointer. It's what we do.
Is that what he says?
I think so. Pulls his mask down. He just like absolutely nails it. And he's like, that's what I do. In addition to not prosecuting banks.
We used to have politicians with swagger who cared about populism.
Hell yeah. Give us that, please.
And then Obama trusted people who wanted to be in the administration, agreed with his mission.
Ugh.
Yeah.
All right, political revolution tomorrow.
Also, briefly, what do you think about Kendrick saying the revolution's about to be televised?
Oh, I got hot and bothered with that. Fans of the pod will recognize my Steelers fandom, so I really didn't have a dog in this fight, and I tuned in for the halftime show. And that was, the Drake and Kendrick beef, right? Some might say it's a distraction from the real problems at hand. But I choose to look at it as one of the rare times when the person representing the anti-commercialism camp and just like kind of like shallow commercialism went like into the belly of the beast and was like, here's what's up. And for a little bit there, I was like, yes, that's what I thought of it.
Yeah, I think like Kendrick Lamar represents a merging together of popular culture and a fundamentally anti-corporate, anti-elite, anti-the man movement in some way, which I think we've been desperate for. It kind of happened in the 70s when it was like cool. Oh yeah, don't do the draft and like listen to the Grateful Dead. and it was like cool to be a protester. And then they tried to label us as woke nerds with blue hair who are ugly. But I think it's about time that,
Guilty.
like, yeah. And people are starting to hate on influencers for getting poppy vending machines right now. I think people are so sick of the elites dominating popular culture. And that's a huge step towards revolution. Like, don't discount the culture. It's important.
I love it.